Oh, I'm on. Welcome back to the Gen XYZ podcast. This is Micah. I'm Matt. We're continuing our discussion of Bill Maher's excellent book, What This Comedian Said Will Shock You. And we want to talk about a concept now that Bill brings up in his book, and that is the overall general knowledge level of the average American.
Which on the world stage is not much.
Yeah.
Comparatively.
Comparatively poor. And we can say, it's interesting because I lived in Germany for almost 8 years, and Micah lived over in Germany as well, and he's done a lot of time, working with various three-letter agencies in various positions that it has allowed him to really explore different parts of the world.
Not the Department of Transportation, if that's what.
Yeah.
I look like a truck driver, I know.
So what we found is that I remember being in Germany and just having discussions with average Germans in a bar, and they would ask me about politics and about things. And, I was just always amazed at their level of knowledge. I remember there was a guy came up to me one time, and he wanted to talk to me about the governor of some state, it was Montana or South Dakota. And he said, hey, you heard so-and-so got elected and is now the governor of Montana. And I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know that, And this guy knew more than I did about world affairs. So I was blown away. And that was quite common to run into over there.
Yeah, my landlord was, would come up and it's like, did you see what Trump did today? And
Yeah.
they were just like, and they knew more about our, legislation than,
Yeah.
I was like, where did you get? Can you send that to me? What
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And they seem to just have a better grasp on what the world is really like. Bill Maher in this book, he references things like, Jay Leno's old show, Jaywalking, where he would go around. It was really hilarious, right? Like he would go around and ask people, like, who's the vice president and things like that. And it was amazing. Like, a lot of people didn't know those things. And I found that to be true in the world too. And I don't know what the percentage is, but I bet a high percentage of Americans probably couldn't even point to Germany on a map or even Europe.
Most Congress folks probably couldn't either.
Yeah,
In
especially
fact,
Marjorie Taylor Greene. He brings that up. She doesn't even have a high school education.
which
How crazy is that?
you don't need a high school education
To be a congressperson.
In fact, you can run for Congress from jail.
That's true.
There's literally no rules.
This book is just full of stuff like that. It's really eye-opening. It's like incredible. So we have a congressperson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who does not have a high school education, but she's on the finance committee. That's scary.
What could go wrong?
These are scary facts, right? So Bill talks about
she
that.
might also be doing an awesome job. Who knows?
We don't know. That's true. And you know what? I'm open to that possibility. It just is scary. It seems unlikely that's going to be the case, right?
Unlikely.
Yeah. And then on this subject of knowledge, Bill points out that Americans in general have a very poor level of knowledge when it comes to international affairs and events, as well as this idea of where America, like where we rank in the world. And one of the big things is like this idea of freedom, like, and this is something even from a little kid, like, we've been indoctrinated to think that we live in this incredibly free place. But I think the contrast that you see when you go and you live in another country is that, most people are going to measure their freedom in terms of personal liberties. And if I can walk down the street with a beer in my hand and I don't have to worry about getting a $500 open container ticket, having to go to court, or getting in some sort of confrontation with a law enforcement officer, it's like, in Europe and Germany, you can buy a beer from a freaking vending machine, and I can walk down the street and I can go sit in the park and just have a beer.
And it's never a problem.
It's never a problem. It's so weird. Even a bottle of wine, you could just go get a bottle of wine, get your girlfriend, get a bottle of wine, go down to the fountain, sit there, get a cheese plate, and have a nice little evening, just watching people walk by. Guess what? You didn't hurt anybody.
So when you're saying, like, where the U.S. ranks in the rest of the world, are you talking to, like, they measure like happiness or
Everything.
freedom?
Yeah.
Or because I think wasn't in well, I forgot the study, but they said like the number one happiest place in the world was Finland.
Yeah,
Finland, Norway, Finland, Sweden,
the Nordic countries, and a lot of the European countries there are close behind them. But what you find is you find places where generally more socialistic. There's more of a sense of collectivism among the population, and one of the really common denominators is universal health care. You see that when you have people who care about everybody, there's a difference. When you in Germany, I mean, you're not walking into Denny's at 11 o'clock at night, and your waitress is a single mom, working her third job because she's got to pay medical bills because her son fell off the playground. It's like you see a level of destitution here in the United States that's non-existent in some of these other countries.
Well, America's probably the best place in the world if you have money.
Absolutely.
And it's a pretty violent place if you don't.
Exactly. I mean, I think what we need to be honest with, and what Bill Maher is teaching us here, is that we just need to be a little more honest with ourselves, and that's that we have a particular brand of capitalism here in the United States. It's not as brutal as, like, say, what they have in UAE with Dubai, right? Where you have basically a caste system where you have you have a labor class that basically are indentured servants. We don't have things that extreme, but we do have homeless encampments. We do have over 100,000 homeless men, women, and children in Los Angeles, in one U.S. city alone. I mean, other countries don't have that. Could you imagine 100,000 people in Munich? They didn't have a place to live. It would just never happen.
Well, there's so many things I love about America.
Yeah, me too.
But I think it's important. There's a lot of things about other parts of the world that I also love.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, this is really amazing.
Yeah.
And we probably, obviously, have a lot to learn from the way other countries do it.
Absolutely. And I love America, and I love living here. And I'm just being realistic. I'm just being honest. And I think Bill Maher, he's got some big balls to step up and say, hey, this is what's going on. And I think more Americans, we just need to step up and look at the rest of the world, look at ourselves and say, where do we stand here, right? Anyhow, so I wanted to read this quote real quick from Bill Maher in his book, talking about knowledge and the knowledge level of Americans. Particularly, he starts to talk about academia and what our academic institutions have devolved into. I love this quote from him. He says, as an Ivy League graduate who knows the value of a liberal education, I have one piece of advice for the youth of America. Don't go to college. And if you have to go, don't go to an elite college because, as events have shown, it just makes you stupid. Obviously, he's being funny, but there's something to be said there. And then he goes on, he says, there are few, if any, positives to come out of the massacre in Israel on October 7th. But one of them is opening America's eyes to how higher education has become indoctrination into a stew of bad ideas, among them the simplistic notion that the world is a binary place where everyone is either oppressor or oppressed. In the case of Israel, oppressors. So, this is something that he points out that's where I think he's got the biggest balls, because for him to come out and say, look, the people who are choosing to view the world in terms of this binary, they are not liberals. They are not liberals.
So, like the people who run the education system.
Them, just in general in America. But this is what when you go into university now in the United States, you don't really have a choice. This is what you're being taught. You're being taught these extremely simplistic ideas about the world that are binary and bigoted. Is that everything can be divided up into these categories of oppressor versus oppressed. And it's just not the way the world works. The world is incredibly nuanced. There's lots of different variables going on. What do you think, Micah?
Well, I think Bill brings up a great point here that, what is happening at an elite university that's $80,000 a year, and it's almost like it's a waste of money, because what are you getting there?
Especially if the outcome after 4 years of being, quote, taught these things, you come out and you have a less accurate perception of the world, right?
Yeah,
what does that do for us?
There's like the university, they should be hardcore research going on.
Yeah.
That, becomes like, intellectual property that helps out our country and obviously helps out the rest of the world.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I love that chapter, because it was like you would sit there and think that, Harvard education is going to be more valuable than like a state school, like where I went. Oh,
Yeah.
I think you went to a state school.
Yeah, I went to Ohio State. Yeah.
But yeah, there's this like more accountability of what is actually going on in these universities, and I think they were exposed. I think they're exposed for some cracks in the armor.
Yeah, very much so. And it's one of these situations where, like I said, you're going to come out, you're going to graduate, you're going to have a less accurate worldview. You're going to make a lot of assumptions about the world that just really aren't true. And I think it's going to do a disservice to those graduates, and it's also going to really inform the decisions that they make. And those people are going to move into positions where they may shape policy. And so you're going to, one of the really key things and that should be very worrisome to people is the fact that, as you said, universities should be these places where there's a lot of discourse back and forth. There's different ideas, and those ideas are debated. And what that means is that you allow space for people who have different ideas. And what we're seeing in universities now is the opposite. There is no space for other ideas. As a matter of fact, people who have ideas that are different than this very simplistic binary worldview, they are shunned. It's almost, there's been so many speakers who have been, even in many cases, physically attacked, had bottles thrown at them, if you have somebody come in who is even remotely considered conservative and comes onto a college campus nowadays, they need security. How crazy is that?
Yeah, the universities should be the place where that discourse, that classic liberalism, that open-mindedness of ideas should be encouraged. And yet It's like, no, we're going to shut that down. Only this worldview is going to be taught here.
Exactly, yeah.
Unchallenged.
Yeah.
I disagree with that.
And to end this out, I just want to say one thing that Bill Maher says in this book that I think is great is he says that he refuses to think of wokeism, this binary wokeism. He refuses to accept it as an extension of liberalism. So what he's saying in that is he's saying this is not liberalism in any way. This is a bigoted binary worldview. I'm not going to go so far as to say this is some sort of mind virus or something like that, like Elon Musk has called it and others. But it is definitely not an accurate way to view the world, and it is definitely not something that should have any place in an actual legitimate university.
Well said.
Thanks.
Well said.
So, that said, we'd love to hear what you guys think.
That was from chapter 2 in the book.
Yeah, chapter 2 and 3. I think that was on 3.
We're barely getting warmed up.
We're just getting warmed up. So we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.